I don't know, Boston was a city right before New York on tours, so we would get every band probably right before, or maybe 2 gigs before they'd go to New York. So we saw everyone. I got to see, my first gig I went to was Led Zeppelin in 1969, and then the Rolling Stones, and saw Jimi Hendrix. So I was really into rock and roll, but also into soul music and funk, and then that sort of got me into disco when disco really came about out of Philly, the sound of Philadelphia. So yeah, so I just was really into music and was very open-minded and was into lots of different types of music, and that sort of took me on the course. Worked in a record shop, which is the coming of age of anyone who does music. Usually everyone works at a record shop. That's a common bond. And then I got into DJing, and that sort of...
And this was still in Boston?
This was all in Boston, yeah. I went to college in Amherst, which was closer to New York. So I started DJing then, which was 73, 74. Went to New York, bought a mixer and 2 turntables. I mean, this was right at the beginning of the disco boom. It was the records you would play would be Average White Band, Picking Up the Pieces, James Brown, Stevie Wonder, early Michael Jackson 5, and Philly stuff like the OJs and the Spinners. So it was before anyone called it disco, and it was before the whole European school of disco, French and Italian and British, came about. So it was just in the beginning of it all. And but going to New York, I met the people at the record shops, I met the people at the record labels, so I networked, and then, finally moved to New York in like 80.
So 1980, we end up in New York.
Yeah.
You're over in New York with Tina, is this right?
Yeah, my ex-wife, Tina, she was my wife then, and she was a lawyer, and we moved to New York because she had a gig paying decent money. And we lived in Brooklyn, and then I started going to a record shop in Brooklyn, which was a shop called Music Factory, and there were these 2 guys, Donnie and Dwight, who ended up being very important in my life because, first of all, Dwight played numbers for me, which is where I got that beat for Planet Rock, and then Donnie and Dwight became Rocker's Revenge, and they sang Walking on Sunshine. So it was all through their record shop. And I've recently done a film about our relationship and our life, which will be premiering this November at the Dock and Roll. It's finally coming out. James is interviewed in it, and it's a really good film because it tells the story of New York in the 80s, and then our journey, which was a pretty interesting one. But yeah.
I mean, that time in New York, obviously, the rate at which music and culture was evolving within the city before it had even reached the rest of the world was...
so many things that are now worldwide phenomenons and creative explosion came about in New York at that time, whether it was art with Basquiat and Keith Haring and Andy Warhol, or music, and it was the beginning of hip hop, beginning of sort of what you call sort of house music and electro. So it all sort of came about at that time, and to be there and be part of it was incredible because you didn't really know that it would continue to grow and grow and grow, but we did know something was happening there. And there was rock and roll too, so it was sort of, rock and roll had come a bit earlier with the Ramones and Blondie and bands like that, but it was a very amazing time.
Yeah, so you're working within the city, you started getting a few production credits under your belt. I think a key point is obviously Planet Rock. And how did that come about? It was through Tommy Boy Records. Yeah,
I had done quite a few disco records in Boston that had come out. Tease Happy Days by North End. There are a few that got me. I made a name for myself even before I moved there. I had records that Larry Levan would play and Jelly Bean before Planet Rock. But when Tom Silverman decided to open up a label, I was probably one of the only record producers he actually knew.
Right.
Because I wrote reviews for his magazine, and we'd become friends. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to start a label. Do you want to produced some records. I got this guy, Africa Bambaataa, who has all these different rap groups, and I went up to the Bronx River Community Center and saw Bambaataa DJ with Jazzy J. And then, you know, he had 3 different groups. He had Cosmic Force, Jazzy 5, and Soul Sonic. And we went in with Jazzy 5 first, did Jazzy Sensation with a live band, with live musicians. And then it sold enough that he continued the label, which sold like 50, it really did well. It sold like 50,000 really quickly. And then the next one was Soul Sonic Force. And for that one, we decided, when we came upon that beat of numbers, we decided we needed a drum machine because we knew a drummer couldn't play that in time. And at that time, it was all the rap records you had heard before that, be Curtis Blow or Grandmaster Flash, any of them, they were all live.
Yeah.
Everything was live. And I think Planet Rock was the first rap record to use a drum machine. And it wasn't sampling, because sampling didn't exist yet, because there were no samplers yet. So it was all played, but the drum machine was programmed.
And if I remember correctly from reading the book, it's quite, I found it amusing that the drum, you didn't own a drum machine at this point.
No, the studio didn't even have a drum machine. They had a Fairlight, which
pretty cool.
They had somehow got that, and they had a Neve board, but they didn't have a drum machine. Strangely, they didn't. So
you found an ad.
Well, there was an ad in the Village Voice, much like with NME or Melody Maker, when people were looking for other members of the band, they'd go looking for a drummer, and this was like man with drum machine for rent, and we got the guy. I called him and I said, what drum machine? He said 808. I went to Sam Ash or Manny's and heard what it sounded like, called him back, cool, let's do it. And then he came in and we played him numbers and Super Sperm, which is a break beat. And then he showed me how to program, and I did the cowbell and a few other bits. And then he didn't want to check. That's what the fact that he didn't trust Tom's check wrote him out of history, because we never knew his name. We knew his name was Joe, but because we didn't have his last name, we could never give him that credit. And
wow.
Over the years, people have come up and said, "Oh yeah, I'm the guy." But
yeah. How many Joes is there?
There's a lot of Joes in New York. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that would you say that was the point that took everything to the next level as for your career?
It was like a game changer for me. I mean, when and the thing was, in the beginning, the version that got played was the instrumental.
Right.
The rap didn't even get played for a while because DJs like Larry Levan or Jelly Bean, they weren't playing a lot of rap, so they played the instrumental, which just had the rock, Planet Rock.
Yeah.
That didn't have the rap. And then finally, Mr. Magic, who was a radio DJ, he started playing it in New York on the radio, and then it blew up. But it was like 2 records in one. That's the thing, because the instrumental W one got played, and then once they flipped it over, it went to a whole other market, which was this new hip hop rap market. So it's pretty cool.
And so you could have found yourself at the center of hip hop there, but you kind of went in a different direction.
Yeah, I didn't, because with rap you had to deal with rappers, which I didn't really, we didn't really have a lot in common. I mean, some of Globe, who's the guy who wrote most of the lyrics in the Soul Sonic. Really, I mean, they were all intelligent guys. I'm just saying we didn't relate to each other that well.
Right.
But well enough. I mean, I would give them the assignment, like with Looking for the Perfect Beat and Renegades of Funk. I gave them the title, and I said, let's do a track, Looking for the Perfect Beat.
Yeah.
Gave them a bit of a remit and an assignment, and they wrote to that. And then Renegades of Funk, they didn't want to do Renegades because they thought it would be too controversial. They were like, I don't want to be a renegade. I go, well, Malcolm X was a renegade and Martin Luther King. And the Globe took it, ran with it, and it came out great. So, but I liked making dance circuits. And I would make my rap records with dance circuits.
Of course.
Planet Rock was a dance record with a rap on it, not a rap record,
Yeah.
I always thought that. So I probably should have stuck with rap longer. I must admit that I think I got bored with it too quickly, to be honest. But
I think the path that you did pursue, all the places, having read the book that I know you've been.
Yeah.
you've always pursued what
Well,
what you're interested in.
I'm not regretting what I did, but I regret like having sort of got bored too quickly.
Right.
I mean, that was the thing. If you read my book, I ADHD like crazy, and I'd get bored. I'd do other things. I'd have 10 things going at once. So I never focused on any one thing long enough to, sort of fully grasp it. I think, I mean, So, but that was my life. That is my life.
And I think at this point it's worth saying as well that obviously Planet Rock had transcended New York, gone global. I think they're quite a key part of your story. I know you saw Hooky the other day. New Order came into your life. I think you were quite influential on where they went next, despite the fact that you only worked together a few times, and the fact that you've remained friends is probably testament to that.
Oh yeah, we're great. I mean, we are great friends. We've been friends for 40 years, and yeah, I mean, I love their music. I love the music they did without me. The favorite New Order songs of mine, I had nothing to do with. But the fact is, I think I was almost more influential with them for them doing like the Hacienda and stuff, because I took them out to all the clubs in New York when they came over that first time, and we had this big gig at Bonds, which was a big. It's where the Clash had famously had that.
This in New York?
Yeah, but the Clash had that week residency there where they had Grandmaster Flash play, and it was like a huge thing because they actually helped, I think it was in 81 or 80, but they actually brought hip-hop to the world by sort of having Grandmaster Flash open for them. So, but I took New Order to that gig, and it was like, Soul Sonic Force, Rocket's Revenge, The System. It was like about 8 different groups, and I didn't even know I brought them to that gig. And recently, Hooky and I did a podcast with Hooky, and he was like, "Oh yeah, remember you took?" I said, "No, I don't remember. I took you to that party." He said, "Oh yeah, that changed our life." He said that night made us want to do the Hacienda, and then I apologized for that because I know how much money he lost on the Hacienda. So, but I mean, New Order, we're great friends, and over the years I'll pop in and do something for them. A few years ago, I did a remix, "Be a Rebel," which I thought was a really good remix. Yeah, it was during COVID, so literally it didn't really get the exposure. And I've done some stuff with Hooky that the Freebase. There's a Freebase record I did as a remix. So yeah, we still I'd love to do another record with Barney or with Hooky or. With both, but that will
bring
never
them
happen.
together.
I could probably do it without them knowing it. I could get Barney on the track and then have Hooky play on it.
I think your next great plan has just been spawned.
Yeah,
if we do that. Do you mind going? I'm trying to just as a sort of template, I'm sort of going chronologically through your life. Is that something you want to do, or do you want to jump on?
I'm here.
Is there? I mean, maybe I'm just going to open it up to questions immediately. We're in the mid-80s. I think after New Order, I'd say the next thing that happened, which was, I don't think people realise how influential it was that your extended remixes of major pop artists actually the influence and the effect that that's had on DJ culture. I wasn't even aware I was playing some of your mixes when I used to DJ. Particularly your Hall & Oates Out of Touch remix, that extended version, I was obsessed with that. And you were also quite influential in the production of that record, despite not.
I was involved in that, and the only reason I didn't get a full production credit or producer credit was that they had already hired Bob Claremont and T-Bone Walk, and Hall & Oates were producing it. So I was brought in as mix consultant, but I mean, I was at every session and had a lot to do with it, but 5 producers was too much, basically.
Yeah, of course.
But definitely on the mix front, and on the recording, and on the beats, so it was all, I produced the record. I mean, or at the least co-produced the record.
Yeah.
But it was a great, I had been a real fan of Hall & Oates's, and I worked with Darryl first on a Diana Ross record, which was swept away. So me, Darryl, and Diana, got in Tommy's limo, had a few bottles of wine. We were driving around New York, she loved wine, and she would get drunk after like 3 glasses. But we had a blast making the record. And then Tommy, who was Hall & Oates' manager and my manager at the time, he said, "Oh, you got to hang out with John and listen to John's songs," because we were going to go in to do Big Bam Boom, and we were working in my studio a lot too.
Yeah.
And John came and he played me a bunch of things, and nothing really. Yeah, they were okay. But then he said, "Oh, I have a track I think would be really good for the Stylistics." And at the time, I had a label called Streetwise, which was sort of almost at the end of its of its lifetime. But we'd signed the Stylistics, and he knew that. And Stylistics were a favorite group of Hall & Oates's, and he plays me this track, and I'm like, "Oh, holy shit! I think it's a #1 record, but it's not for the Stylistics, for Hall & Oates." And I called Tommy and said, hey, yeah, did John got anything? I go, "Yeah, he wrote a #1 record. You should come by." But he thinks it should be for the Stylistics. Tommy was over in like 15 minutes. We played it. He was like, "You're right. It's a smash." Blah blah blah. And then we went into Electric Lady Studios, and John's demo was all the chorus, no verses, but the chorus,
Okay.
all the music. So we went in and we did the backgrounds, just Daryl and John stacking them. And then John was like, "Oh, it was a Friday night." He said, I want to go to the Hamptons, whatever. He left, and Daryl stayed there. And he said, Daryl's like, "Get me a microphone." And we're in the control room, and he starts singing, "Smoking Gun," so hot. He starts singing these made-up words you couldn't really understand, but he had the melody there. And then I'm like, "Oh shit," because I think John thought he was going to sing the lead, but Tommy was like, "You talk to John." I'm like, "You're the manager, not me." I mean, I don't even have production credit, motherfucker. So, but it worked out on that one. And then there was another song that John wrote the same way, "Possession Obsession," which he ended up singing, and it wasn't a hit, but But it was a great time to work with them, and But I mean, that all came about with Tommy. Tommy was really good friends with the people at Epic Records, and CBS, and the first thing I did for them was Cyndi Lauper, "The Girls Just Want to Have Fun." That remixed it really well, and then Springsteen's people heard that, and then I got in with Springsteen. So that was sort of right at the same time, and then Tommy was sniffing around, and he saw all the work I was getting, so of course he wanted to manage me.
Yeah.
And then the Hall & Oates thing came, and then the Dylan thing, so it was in that order.
Yeah.
So I was doing all, like, the remixes were big. That was a big thing, because you got paid, a lot of money, and you got to work with great artists, and you didn't have to really work with them because you were remixing them. So Springsteen came in once and hung out, and then when he loved the mix, he was like, "You do what you do." So sort of.
Well, you only found out much later on. I don't want to give away. This is what I'm recording from the book. But you only found out quite recently off his manager, the Springsteen remix.
Yeah, no, it was. You got to read the book for that one.
All right, okay.
No, it's just that my remix of one of Springsteen's songs was actually very important with it becoming a single. So that
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which could have changed the whole course of his history, but
There you go.
Well, that's what his manager said. I don't know.
Well, it made sense when I read the book, and I think the Springsteen jump off. Again, I'm gonna put a pin in this here when I say that. Was it through Springsteen that you met Little Stevie?
I met Stephen before, really. I met Stephen because, strangely, Jimmy Iovine.
All right. Okay.
Who, at that point was a record producer. I met him through, there was a group called Face to Face, which he had put in Streets of Fire, and this is going down a rabbit hole, but whatever. I met Stephen through Jimmy, and then Stephen and I wrote a few songs together.
Yeah.
One being "You Don't Have to Cry" for Jimmy Cliff,
right?
For Something Wild, the Jonathan Demme movie. I mean, all this shit was happening in New York at the time. I knew Jonathan pretty well, and then Stephen and I met, and then we just ended up doing the Sun City project. So
I could just let you reel off names.
Yeah, I know.
For the next sort of 40 minutes or so.
Okay.
We should talk about Sun City because it feels like politically and as a sort of who's who of people who showed up to be on that record, it's really important. But I think I would like to, if anyone has any questions at this point, if they want to get them in now based on it, because we're going to go off on weirder and weirder tangents, and it's exciting. So if there's anything anyone wants to
So
ask
why don't you
about
take
now.
questions on up to 84?
Okay, so 84,
Yeah.
Arthur's birth, Boston through to the
Planet Rock. And
to Planet Rock, yeah.
All right, good.
I just wondered if you ever had to pay Kraftwerk for the use of that, or did you ever meet them? And
Well, Tom Silverman ended up sort of, because it was his record label. He was the one selling it. So he made a deal with them, and he ended up raising the list price of the 12-inch $1 a record, so that basically the people buying the records paid Kraftwerk, which New Order always thought that was genius, and
Yeah.
and it was. They passed on that Kraftwerk's money to the buying public, I guess, at that point. Because at the time it was the 12 inches were $4.99 list, which would have sold for $3.49 in the shop.
Okay.
And then he took it to $5.99, so they were charged $3.99, so 50 cents more, and that went to Kraftwerk.
There you have it. Simple economics.
Yeah,
Where
well,
it pays to have a manager.
Yeah. That was Tommy though.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Arthur, I know you played those clubs. I believe they were mafia controlled. I wonder if you had any anecdotes about...
Yeah, I mean, in Boston they were all mafia, and in New York. But see, I didn't really DJ in New York. I mean, the clubs, the Funhouse, total mafia. And I remember one night Sylvester Stallone came in with all his buddies. It was like pretty fun. There's actually a picture of that, of Sylvester Stallone, like that, and all the doormen. I'm like, huge guys, but in Boston, it was really, there was a guy named Henry Vera, who was sort of Irish, and he owned all the clubs. He was very important, but he had cool people working for him. It wasn't, it never got in the way of anything. But when disco hit in '76 and '77, all these sort of what we call supper clubs or something like that, they all put discos in, which was worldwide. I know there were discos everywhere, I'm sure in Leeds also. But it was called Sadie's, and it was, and I played in numerous Sadie's, horrible clubs with mirror ball and, and the floors, lit up floors. But it really took over. It took over America, disco. If you look back, it was crazy. But a lot of the supper clubs, it was the place. Sadie's was in a place called the Chateau de Ville.
Okay.
It sounds like a car, right? Yeah, but it was that kind of thing. But never. I mean, later on, I was partners with Morris Levy, and he was full on gangster. He just owned so many of the. He owned Birdland.
Right. Okay.
He was just. It's known. And if you read any books about Morris Levy,
he was the inspiration for Hesh and the
Sopranos.
Yeah.
So he was my partner.
There you go.
And Tommy Mottola, who was supposedly connected too.
Yeah.
He said to me, "No, you don't want to get in business with Morris." And I go, "Well, yeah," but he goes, "No, don't do it." And then it was the only good advice he ever gave me, actually.
Yeah.
But I did it. I didn't listen.
Yeah, you can read the book to find out how that ended for
how that ended. I'm still here. He's supposedly dead, but I think he's in Australia in the witness protection plan. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions? Mafia related or otherwise?
What about disco sucks? Because you were saying like disco massive in America, and then suddenly.
Yeah, it was more of a racist thing, like these DJs started, because when they started burning the records, they were burning like Stevie Wonder. It was black records, so, and it was weird that it was in Chicago, where then a few years later, the birth of house music and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it was just an anomaly. Rocker, it's the same type of thinking that put that idiot in the White House now. There are people in America, it's the same thing,
Did it affect you though? Sorry, that's what I meant to ask. Did it
No, it didn't affect me at all, because when that happened, it was sort of right probably right before, I think, when I was making records, and it wouldn't have, you know, it just, what happened was at that time, a lot of major labels sort of, you know, did stop making a lot of disco records, but then that gave the opportunity to independent people and producers like myself and labels like Tommy Boy and Streetwise to take up the slack, you know, so it didn't affect me at all, no.
Positively.
Yeah.
There was a hand up behind as well. Was there a question? There you go, mate.
Sorry, it's just with New Order and the Confusion video,
Yeah,
there's the section where you take the big spools to the fun house
Yeah.
and put them on. And I watched
that's
that-
exactly how it was. I mean, that's how the video came about, because Tony Wilson saw me do that, and then he thought, oh, that would be a great video, and he convinced me to you know, be in the video. But even, I mean, New Order were never in any of their videos, so
Yeah.
he had to convince them to be in the video too. But I don't know if that answered the question before you asked it. But,
Yeah, it was just around the tech, because normally people would go to Bernie Grumman and get things mastered and take things around, but taking the spools in was really raw.
yeah, well, it was, yeah, I mean, we wanted to test out the record before it was done. I mean, we'd do an acetate and then take that out, and then to see if the mastering was proper, and if it wasn't, we'd go back to Herb Powers or whoever was mastering it. But I wanted to see how the groove and the arrangement were too, so the only way to do that is play it in the club, and it always strikes me strange how a lot of DJs like are afraid to play their records before they think they're done, because how do you know if they're done if you don't play it for a crowd? And I'm sure with a band, you'd like to play your new stuff out to just get a vibe, or do
Absolutely,
you not?
yeah.
You have to,
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, you
I
got to,
mean-
because how do you know? I mean,
Yeah.
you know when you play something, you know, even if it's a new song, you see there's something in the crowd,
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
tell, you know, so.
Yeah, and you go back and you tweak it, and
Yeah.
you figure out which parts aren't. Well, yeah, it's absolutely essential. There
All right,
is.
you can move on with my life now.
Come on, move on to the next part of Alpha's life. So you're in full remix mode. You're making good money. You're a success story. I
Yeah.
think it's fair to say you're in demand.
I'm a cocaine addict.
You're a cocaine addict. I was going to get to that. It's well covered in the book. You're
Yeah.
working. The blow came into focus because you were working so hard, right? That was the main. You weren't into drugs early on. You were.
No, I mean, I had been, the thing was, I had been into drugs as a kid, definitely.
Yeah.
Then when I went to college, I sort of stopped, and then I moved back to Boston, and a friend of mine had a really great cocaine connection. So
Yeah.
basically, we'd get all this fronted to us, and I'd give all the DJs I knew, like, an eight ball or something, and
Yeah.
and they'd sell it, and so
Okay.
I had a little
So-
criminal enterprise
Yeah.
going on. But I wasn't really doing it. Then I started doing it, and then when I moved to New York, my mother died around 78, and probably for a year I went off doing drugs. And then when I went to New York, I stopped. So like
Okay.
Planet Rock and Walking on Sunshine, I had
Sober.
that was sober, and then
Yeah.
then Perfect Beat was full on.
Quite
you know,
tinny-
so that was
tinny
like
master.
83 to 86, 87.
Yeah.
So all those, the Pressure, all the big remixes, all on cocaine, you know.
Yeah.
And but you know yeah, I mean I was doing so much work.
Yeah, of course.
It did keep me going, but obviously
Yeah.
it was fun. I mean, you know, like anyone who does a lot of drugs, at first it's an amazing, it's
Yeah.
fun, you know, and then
Yeah.
when it
Go-
takes over
yeah.
your life and you know whatever.
And you were still so we'll go back to Sun City. Were you still on the?
I was flying.
That was
Yeah.
the peak of it.
Well, that was the peak because look, I was doing Sun City and all the engineers worked for free,
Okay.
but they all wanted drugs.
They worked for
they got
blood.
paid.
Yeah, yeah.
They to keep them going, and all the musicians. It was like always. The musicians were all like, you know, getting wasted,
Yeah.
and like the leaders of the group, like
Yeah.
Hall and Oates were like parents. When they'd leave the studio, it would all come out, and you know,
Right.
you didn't. Even when you're working with the artist, I didn't do drugs with the artist I worked with. You wouldn't do that. But
Yeah.
but with the band, the band were
Okay.
fine.
So that was
But I mean, Sun City, that you know, that was the most important record I ever made to me, and the most pressure and the craziest stuff. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
you never knew who was going to show up to the studio, and people
Reel off the list. Just for
people
anyone who's
would
not
sort of
aware.
show that, you know, there's like one night Peter Gabriel just walked in. I had spoken to him, but this is when he was at his peak, and he just showed up on his own. And, you know, me and him and the engineer, and
Yeah.
I had him do some stuff in the studio, you know. And then one night Miles Davis showed up, and Herbie Hancock, and
Yeah.
people would just these acts would show up, and always sort of unannounced, and you just had to sort of, you know, like David Ruffin, Eddie Kendrick, Bobby Womack, and George Clinton all at one time, like in the studio, the four of those guys. It was amazing, and you know, but it was a lot of pressure. And little Stephen, he would go home at 9. He
Okay.
worked. That was his limit. He could not do work at night, you know.
Wow.
And he used to they called him Miami Steve. The Springsteen came up with that because he loved the studio so hot.
Right.
So he'd turn the heat on, and then as soon as he'd go, we'd turn the heat down and take out the cocaine, you know.
Right. So that was Sun City, and that
Yeah.
obviously that didn't win the Grammy, but it was nominated for
It
a
was
Grammy.
nominated for the best long form video. The video was great. And also the best rock vocal arrangement. And
Which was
the
some,
Eurythmics won that. I was sort
Yeah.
of pissed off that they won that. And Sting won for the video. So I'll never forget both of those, because
yeah.
that was my one shot at the Grammys. So, you know.
Well, I think
But the record lives, and the project was so important, and it really made it that no artist ever went to Sun City after that.
Yeah.
And also it helped get Mandela out, you know, the attention it brought. So
yeah.
it was a great project, and it was fun, and the music was great, and I did get to meet and you know.
Yeah.
And I have
The
a great
fact-
chapter for the book too.
Yeah,
Which,
I mean
you know.
the pictures are in there.
Yeah,
The list is
Yeah, yeah.
insane for that.
I mean, but there was, you know, Gil Scott Heron. I mean,
yeah,
Big Youth. I mean, they were just
Wow.
And who else? Run DMC and Melly Mel and
Yeah.
Curtis Blow. I mean, and the other thing was it brought together all these diverse, you know, musical genres and
Yeah.
people. And then when the video came out, MTV, who had actually, we had got their camera crew to film this without them knowing it, and then because we had a connection there. So then when the video came out, they played it, and that was the first time there was a really rap on
Wow.
MTV, you know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's massive. Yeah, because
Yeah.
obviously it was facing a lot of
It was
backlash
80
for being so.
It was
so
85.
white-centric,
It was before, you know, before a lot of Beastie Boys and
Wow.
Run DMC. Yeah, it was right before Run took off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sun City, very important record.
Yeah.
Did that? I might be wrong again here. I can't. My memory's not that good. Was Al Green involved in Sun City?
No,
That came
that
afterwards.
came after. Yeah.
That's
I-
another key
that-
part.
Yeah, that was like 80. That was right when after Sun City, and I lost my label to the Mafia. I lost Streetwise
Yeah.
to the Mafia, and then I obviously opened another label called Criminal. You know.
There we go.
And then I got a solo deal with A&M in the UK, and I started, you know, writing songs, and I worked with Martin Fry and Jimmy Somerville and Andy McCluskey. So I was doing a lot of writing with artists over here, and then right when I quit doing drugs, I did a fast. I did like a sort of a fast for like a month, and no
Okay.
food, no nothing, just protein drink. And it like at week 3, I came up with this idea from the song "Message Is Love,"
Yeah.
which I wrote. I ran over to my keyboard player's house and we wrote it, and then that helped me get the deal for my album. And Will Downing, who at that point was my sort of studio vocalist, he had sung it, but we had also just got him a deal with Chris Blackwell on Island, and Chris Blackwell wouldn't let us use Will on my album, which, you know, sort of,
So why was that?
A bit cheeky,
How
yeah.
was that? What?
he just, because he wanted the song, but it wasn't part of Will's album, it was part of my album.
Oh, so he wanted it on his record.
Yeah, he wanted
Alright,
on.
Okay.
So, and I had signed with A&M, and that was a song they loved. So then I had to find a singer, And then finally, Jerry Moss, A&M, you know,
Yeah, of course,
A&M,
yeah.
the M of A&M, he convinced Al Green to do it. So, and Al Green had been my favorite singer forever. He was like, so that was, you know, going in the studio with Al Green was amazing.
Yeah, but it was under your name. It was Arthur.
It was
Baker and the-
Arthur Baker featuring Al Green,
which is
which is pretty cool.
pretty cool.
But yeah, it was cool. I have to admit that's again one of my favorite records I did. Is
It's
Messages
great
Love,
record,
because
yeah.
you know I wrote all the lyrics, wrote the melody, and
got Al Green to
and
sing
got Al
it.
Green to sing it. You know, what could go wrong? You know.
Yeah, and that took you. So that was the lead single of your solo, your first.
Yeah,
solo
that was the second single. There was
Okay.
a thing called "It's Your Time," and
Okay.
Shirley Lewis. I don't know if you know, like Linda Lewis's
All right.
sister. She sang that, and but by then I had come. See, I didn't get to England until after I stopped doing cocaine, because I
Yeah.
wouldn't fly. I didn't fly anywhere.
Okay.
So like 86, 87, that's when I started coming over here, and that's when I met Andy and Jimmy and Martin, and I recorded all their vocals here,
Yeah.
spending a lot of time in the UK, and then that record came out, and it didn't do as well as I thought. It did really well in Germany because the Berlin Wall
Yeah.
had just come down. So we did a tour of Germany. We were in the East and West
Wow.
Germany, literally right at the same time.
You and Al Green on the bus together.
Me and Al Green and David, what's his name? David, the one who's really famous, the Hasselhoff. Yeah, he was staying in the same hotel, and there'd be all these crowds of people, and Al would think it was for him, and
Yes, right.
I said, David, hey David, yeah. But Al was crazy. I mean, Al is certifiably bonkers. He is.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I mean, you can't take away his talent, but he was crazy.
He refers to himself in the third person.
Third person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a separate Al Green singing, channeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'd go, he can't sing it no better than that. You know, like when he sang the vocal. It was great though. I mean, we did some other stuff. We wrote a song together. I mean, it's
Yeah.
special, you know, for sure.
Yeah, of course. And so you finished touring Germany with Al Green and David Hasselhoff.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
didn't think it was going to come out of my mouth.
The
today.
wall comes down, you know.
Yeah, you brought the Berlin Wall
David
down.
Hasselhoff brought the wall down, that's all.
Yeah, thank you for your service. And
For clearing that up.
yeah, and then I suppose again, this is what year was this again?
That was 89.
89.
Yeah.
And then you started coming to the UK. You started spending a lot of time in London.
A lot, yeah.
You moved here at some point. What year was that?
We opened up the first, the Elbow Room.
There we go.
That was me.
And here we get that.
Yeah, we opened that first one, I think, in 95 or something.
And that was in Notting Hill.
That was in Notting Hill, yeah.
Okay. When
But-
did you open up the Leeds one?
Not that far after. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe
1998.
98.
98?
Exactly.
That's not that long after.
No,
yeah.
that was really quick. We did that one before we did another one in London, or maybe we had two in London. It was before. Listen, it was definitely before the one in Shoreditch, and
Yeah.
it was before the one in Islington because that was 2000. So
Yeah.
I remember coming up to Leeds, and today on the way here I went back to that address.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
and
going to
saw the
say.
building, and I really remember actually coming here, and Harvey Nichols had just opened up. Yeah, and my friend Dave Bear, he showed us around.
Of course.
Yeah, no, I remember. It's funny because I
What is
probably
it now?
haven't been here more than 2 or 3 times. I mean, when the place was open,
Yeah.
I DJ'd a few times.
Did you do Back to Basics, Dave's?
Yeah, I did that
Yeah.
once. I did that once too. But Dave, but it was really funny because everyone was like, "Hey, yeah, you work with Dave, huh?" I go, "His club." I go, "It's sort of he's working for us." But it's okay. It was fine.
Yeah.
And the Utah Saints had that night there, which was amazing.
Right. Yeah. Of course.
They had that residency, which would win every year, like best club night.
Yeah.
It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I moved to Leeds in 2009, and I used to go to the Elbow Rooms quite a lot. There was a lot of live shows on at the time.
Yeah.
I saw quite a few bands play
Yeah.
there. There was a lot of Latin music, sort of like that was coming through that was being played at the Elbow Rooms when I sort of moved here. I say a lot. I saw about 2 or 3 shows,
Yeah.
but that was quite condensed to
Yeah.
see 3
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
Latin shows
Yeah.
in the Elbow.
No, I don't remember much. I really don't remember a lot about it. I remember the
Yeah.
nights I went, and I remember the first night we took the walk through, and then me and Dave did a hard hat tour, which is on YouTube.
Right.
So you could see us with our hard hats walking through. I think BBC Leeds or something.
Okay.
It
That's
was
still
on,
online.
It was on TV. Yeah,
Alright.
it's crazy. Yeah.
Wicked. And so that was it. That meanwhile in Leeds, but then back in London. You're now living in London.
I'm living in London, and just did the electronic album in '98,
Yeah.
and I mean, but before that, who could forget Babylon Zoo Spaceman? Come on.
Of course.
Footnote,
yeah. See, this is
footnote,
what I
bud,
mean,
come on.
yeah.
We got these English footnotes. You know?
Yeah. Did you see royalties off the advert?
Yeah, I did. Well, no, I
Alright.
saw royalties off the single because for some reason I never took royalties. I'd always want upfront
Right,
cash,
yeah,
and
yeah.
people didn't like to give royalties. And my
Yeah.
manager over here, Stephen Budd, he got me a point on that, and I actually made like another 80 grand or 100 grand on the single because it sold
Nice.
like 3 million copies or
Yeah.
something. It was pretty nuts. Yeah.
So without that tune, we might not have the Elbow Rooms.
Well, no, I didn't invest. No, that's the one. I didn't invest that money in the Elbow Room.
Right. Okay.
But no, that record, I had done it like a year and a half
Yeah.
before it came out, and this guy Clyde Black, who was the A&R guy,
Yeah.
he changed labels and took that record with him. So,
Right.
So I didn't know, and then next thing I know, this record's totally blown up, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was great. It was great.
Yeah. And I think, like, from reading the book as well, there was a lot. I mean, the first time I met you, you were talking about there were things that I'd listened to that I was never even aware you were involved in, like Ash and
Yeah.
Mogwai, obviously,
Yeah.
and then Kieran Hebden, obviously, Fridge Fortet.
Yeah.
All this culminated.
Well, that
this
was all
kinda
around that
happening.
time. That was like '98 to 2002.
Okay.
I'd moved to London. I was in the midst of Primrose Hill, all the recording studios, Mayfair,
Right.
and my manager Stephen Budd got me quite a few. I did a remix for Suede. I mean, I did
Yeah.
remixes for. But the thing with Ash is it was a really good record. It was that Life Less Ordinary
Yeah.
for the film. That was great, and yeah, it was a great time to live in Primrose Hill because I got really friendly with Primal Scream, and Manny was playing on all these records I was doing, and
Nice.
and I met Mogwai and like you said, Fridge, and I had them play on records I was doing yet another
Yeah.
solo album.
And there was I have to mention this because this is still the one that baffles me and that it didn't get released, was that you managed to get Mogwai, Kieran Hebden and Pharaoh Sanders on the
Yeah.
same record.
Well,
and it didn't see the light of
it
day.
didn't get released because I didn't finish it.
Yeah.
I'm to blame. I mean, I just didn't. I was really focused on making this album.
Yeah.
And I even had press and NME and Melody Maker about the album, like literally this
Yeah.
crazy solo project with all these people, and then I started doing the Return to New York parties and went into like Electro Clash, and I just didn't do anything with them. But a lot of the records came out as singles over the years, but
Yeah.
the whole album is coming out in it's due to be out in October.
This October.
Yeah.
All right.
I better
there you
get
go.
working on it though.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
But I'm probably going to just use the mixes that I had because I want it to be like this thing that should have come out, and I don't want to start I mean, I'll have remixes done, but I want the album to be as it
Yeah.
would
of
have been at
course.
the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty good though. It's
All right.
I was sitting with the guy who I'm working with now, Ed Cartwright, and he we sat in a proper studio and listened to it. And he goes, "Why the fuck didn't you put this out? It's done. What the hell?" I go, "Yeah, but I just didn't have anyone to feed the ideas off of at
Yeah.
that point, But
Doing it on your own can get like that, though, I find.
Yeah.
If you're in complete control.
I was
completely empathise
or
with that.
complete out of control.
Yeah.
No, because you don't know. Is that finished? I don't know. You just without someone saying, yeah, get it out there. I mean, I do that
Yeah.
from a lot of artists I know who I'll be like, you should put that out, it's done.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone in, with Soul Wax, too
Yeah.
many DJs got. So I went in one year and I've heard this album, I'm like, that's amazing. I go back a year later, they're still working on that same tune, and I said, that makes what you played last year.
Yeah.
But you know.
And you can overcook it. You can overcook
you can
it.
totally
Yeah.
blow it, yeah, you can, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of soul activity, I mean, sorry, I just feel like I'm name dropping on your behalf
Yeah.
with half of this, but I suppose everyone's bought the book or is going to buy the book. But I had those Too Many DJs mixes, and I didn't realise I was listening that you were behind the Busta Rhymes and Beach Boys
Yeah.
Woo Ha, which is
Yeah.
what do you call it again? The something.
Beach Busters.
The Beach Busters, yeah. That I hammered that. I used to drive around to that
really?
for years, and I never
didn't
knew
know
it was
that.
you.
Yeah.
So again, you just
I played that recently, and I mean, obviously, I did it way before Brian Wilson died, but
yeah.
like 20 years before. But I was opening for Hooky last week, 2 weeks ago. It was a few days after Brian Wilson had passed, and I played it, and you know, no one, you know, obviously they probably all assumed I just had made it, but I used to play that when I DJ for New Order. That would be the last track I would play before they'd go on. And one night I was in Brixton Academy, and Barney would usually call and say, "Oh, we'll be there in 5 minutes" or whatever, and I'd go. Then I'd put on the Beach Boys thing, and one night he calls, "Yeah, we'll be there in 5 minutes. Play it." No Barney, no New Order. He calls me up. We're still at the hotel. So I had to go back in my bag of tricks and, you know, keep playing. Which, but
that sounds
yeah.
sounds like quite standard behaviour for Barney from reading the book.
Yeah,
your relationship with him, not my personal opinion, but you know him well than I do.
Yeah.
I think we've got about 10 minutes left, so I think this brings it kind of full circle for me. So the last thing that I'll highlight from the book and just from your career, which feels really important before we sort of open it out, and there's a lot more that came after this still that we just don't have time for, but the 808 documentary, you helmed that, and you brought in so many. I mean, again, it's not the first time, but Remy and Damon are in that.
No, I knew both of them because I opened a restaurant in Notting Hill called Harlem, and we had a downstairs area and you know, like a basement bar.
Yeah.
And Damon would come all the time. He lived right on Westbourne Grove, and he would come, and Remy would come, and they'd bring, like, one night they called me up and said, "Oh, I got this African guitarist and band," and they just came in and
pull up and play,
and they all pulled up and played. But I got them to be in the doc, and it was, you know, we got pretty much everyone we wanted to. It was really, because I felt like there was a story to be told about the 808, but also about the people who use the 808.
It's an incredible documentary, that, by the way. I think that's, you know, the first time I watched that, I was just blown away by it. And
were you blown away at how stoned Remy was?
Well, see, I didn't know Remy at the time.
Oh, you did?
So I was watching
it was
Damon
so funny.
Albarn and his mate talk. Well, Damon's mainly talking about like
spatial
Latin percussion or something. And then both off the
No, it was very
I rewatched it.
It was really funny because we said we interviewed them really early. They said, "Oh, yeah, let's do it early in the morning."
Yeah.
So I figured we're going to come in and they won't be stoned. But I was very wrong.
You got some gold out. You got some gold out of Damon. Remy doesn't really talk.
Think about the cowbells and the space and the light. It actually makes sense when you get stoned and listen to them.
Absolutely, I think.
But it is a good doc.
Yeah, and you got to go to Japan.
And I got to go to Japan on my birthday. Fell out with my co-producer, the money guy, because he said, I said, "Listen, I'm flying there for 2 days. On my birthday, he wanted me to go economy." I said, "No fucking way." I said, "It is literally no. I'm not going to do it. You go." And obviously, Mr. K, the owner of Roland, who created he wanted to talk to me and not my partner. So I ended up getting him to pay for the business class seat. But it was amazing to go to Roland and have to make beats for Mr. K.
Yeah.
I went to his office. He had a birthday cake for me. It was pretty. It was
I mean,
pretty cool, man. That's a cool moment for sure.
absolutely nowhere near the end of your life, and you're still
Yeah.
going, still obviously going strong. A
Yeah.
lot more to come, but,
Yeah.
but I think to go from Planet Rock to making beats for Mr. K,
Yeah, that's
Roland
a pretty
Factory in
good-
Japan.
that's a pretty good,
Like, the book doesn't end there, and Arthur obviously is still. He's
Yeah.
got his solo album's going to come out in October.
Yeah.
We've heard so. Plenty more to go. I haven't read the book. Honestly, I blasted through it in about 2.5 days last weekend when you sent it me. I loved it. I'm sure all of you will too. If you've not got a copy, please buy one and tell your friends about it. I'm
Yeah.
going to stop plugging half an hour.
Okay, enough.
Any questions before we finish? Thanks for joining us, by the way.
The front of the book, there's some pictures of cassettes.
Yeah,
So obviously,
I have the cassettes.
yes. So I read that when you were a young man, you looked at the credits and things on records with a lot of intent, you know.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
That's exactly what I do. So when I seen your book, I'm looking at all the cassettes and thinking, and that looks like his own mix. And
yeah.
one that I'd like to ask a question about is, there's one on there. It said New Order, 5 tracks. And right in the corner of the cassette, it says London Records. So there's a little bit of interest there because New Order have just joined with Factory Records, London Records. In
Well, London.
1983.
Yeah.
What tracks were on that? Can you remember? Were they your personal favourites off? The
Oh
album?
man, no, that was later than '83. That was like '93.
93, I beg your pardon.
Yeah. No, that's when I did the. I think it's when I did 1963 and also "Let's Go, Nothing for Me," which I co-wrote with them. So
Right.
I think that's what it was. It might be. I think that's what it was on there. But I have the cassette. I'll see.
Yeah.
I kept all the cassettes, so that's the thing. Keeping all the tapes and the multi-tracks and the half inches. Usually they'd be dated, so that way I was able to like sort of put a timeline of that time in my life when I shouldn't really know when anything was going on because who knew. But with the tapes and with the track sheets and stuff from back then, I have all that stuff, so I was able to figure out when I was working on stuff because usually I didn't realize Dylan and like whatever Hall and Oates were at the same, running at the same time in parallel. I'd be popping back to studios and stuff. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Good stuff, thanks.
Any more
Any
questions?
other questions?
Yeah, it's more to do with the kind of technology really. There's been a lot of talk of the 808. I just wondered if there's any kind of techniques that you crafted in the late 70s, early 80s, analog techniques that you keep coming back to simply because they couldn't be, well, I'm sure they could be replicated digitally, but analog just kind of teased out.
I mean, I like sampling the sounds I had from back then. I'm not going to go back to the Mini Moog and get the white noise clap that I have. I'll sample it and use on your remix.
There you go.
No, but there's some sounds that they're just iconic, and you're not going to get them better, And I don't have the patience to do it, really. I mean, but I do go back to the 808 and I'll program it and record it and chop it up. Because I love programming it and putting the reverb on it, and, using that gear. But, it's really what's easy to do. I mean, if I'm in a studio and there's an 808, I'll always program the 808. But as far as like synths, it's sort of, I have a guy who played on the remix I did of Yard Act. He's an amazing musician. He plays some shit on that remix that's insane, and literally you couldn't, And he has a lot of the keyboard gear. So when I play that, there's that one point in the mix with a solo, and it's just
it's great.
people go, it's so good. I mean, it really, it just that remix is just like really good remix,
Any more
Anyone
questions?
else?
At the back.
Is there anybody that you haven't worked with that you would like to work with?
God, Iggy Pop. I mean, I've worked with him. When you get the book, there's a whole chapter about this TV show him and Irvin Welsh were going to do. but no, it was very close. It was a really good idea, but I think I may get to work with him because it looks like Mogwai are going to finally get to do a track with him.
Ah, right.
And-
You're gate crashing. You're invited.
Well, no. What I said to Stuart was, you have to promise me that I get to do a remix, and he said, "You got it."
Sweet.
So
There you go.
that'll be great.
There was another question at the back.
Yeah.
Sorry, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which artist inspired you the most with their musicality and their techniques in the studio that you're probably most surprised by?
God, good question. Pharaoh Sanders it wasn't surprising, but it was amazing because he came in and he just, he hadn't heard the track. I had written 2 tracks, and he just got on and played to it, and he just played like 4 different solos, and then he got his flute, and he was playing flute, and then he was singing, and it's just like it was amazing. It blew me away. I would say him and God, someone who wasn't expected. I'm trying to think. I mean Al Green, but Al Green I knew he'd be amazing. And Miles Davis, but you knew. I mean that's not unexpected, obviously. I don't know if anyone ever blew me away. No. I mean, they blew me away, but I sort of expected it. I mean, Stuart Braithwaite from Mogwai, amazing guitarist, and he can, maybe him because he's known for a certain thing, and then when he came in the studio, he just did some really different things than you would think, and yeah, he's a great guitarist. But
There you have it. Any more questions? We'll answer them all if there's maybe one left, and then we'll call it. If not, Arthur's going to DJ.
I'm going to throw some tracks down.
Yeah. Did we get the second deck working, Aidan?
There is a second deck.
We are throwing some tracks
Yeah.
down. Not so. Yeah, okay. Any more questions?
Anything else in the vaults that hasn't come out?
Oh, tons, yeah. I got vaults. No, I have an album I made in '85. So that was my first solo record before the one, the London, the UK A&M record.
Yeah.
And I'm putting that out. That has a Jeff Beck track. It has Sly and Robbie with Eddie Kendrick and David Ruffin.
Wow.
It has the woman who from Rolls Royce, Gwen Dickey.
Oh yeah.
There's a really cool Gwen Dickey track. It's a whole album, and it was meant to be. It was sort of like a soundtrack, and it sounds like an '80s soundtrack album.
Can I just selfishly ask about Sly and Robbie? Can I just ask about Sly and Robbie? Because did you work with them a bit, or
a bit? Well, I had worked with them. Probably in '82 or '83.
Okay.
No, '83. I went to see them, and they were playing with Black Uhuru. They were like the opening. No, they were the band for Black Uhuru.
Right.
And actually, I'll play a Black Uhuru track when I DJ. I did a remix of, but they were playing with Black Uhuru, and I just went up to them, and there were all these delays, and when they were playing with Black Uhuru, and I was like, really, wow, how did you get the delay so tight? And Sly went like this. So it wasn't a delay; it was how he was playing.
right.
So then I said, "Do you guys want to come in the studio?" So I went in with them, Fred Czar.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And John Roby, and
Right,
he was a keyboard
yeah.
player, who was another amazing musician who, I didn't really expect when I first met him. But we went in and it was literally shit. Nothing came out of it.
Right.
But then when I went to work with Dylan, he was using Sly and Robbie as his bass and drums.
I never knew that.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the album that you produced.
Yeah, but also on a couple of, he used them off and on for a couple of years.
Man, how did I never get that
I don't
connection?
know.
That's
It's
amazing.
It's on.
Right.
But the thing was, so he would go home at 9 o'clock, like Van Zandt. So we would just, as a matter of fact, it's funny because he went home one night and I called Van Zandt and said, Sly and Robbie are here. Do you want to come in? Let's try to write a song. And we wrote this song called Addiction, and then we got Eddie Kendrick and David Ruffin to sing it.
Wow.
So that's going to come out on the album.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got 2 Arthur
Yeah.
Baker albums in the pipeline, still to come. All right. Arthur's going to DJ.
All right.
Thanks for
Thank
joining
you,
us.
guys.
Cheers.